Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and on today's episode we are looking back at the Triumph 2000 tool room lathe. If you've been following along, it's been a little while since I did an episode on this machine, but we've had plenty of other projects going on. So now I've got this headstock stripped down and I've got the bearings to rebuild the headstock. I've got to look at removing the feed gearbox as well, and after inspecting that I've discovered that there's two gears damaged in that gearbox, so I will have to either make up some replacements, repair the ones I've got, or try and source some replacement items. So today's mission, I've got all the parts that I pulled out of the headstock in the last episode, all the gears and all the shafts. So I'm going to go through and get these chucked into the parts washer and keep them in their clusters from each different shaft, and then clean them off, put them back on the same trays and put them aside ready for reassembly. So then I've got everything cleaned down and I can get a look at starting to reassemble the headstock and putting the spindle back in, as I was potentially going to paint the headstock on the inside, but looking at it there, the paintwork's not that bad, so I'm probably just going to go ahead and start the reassembly now that I've got this cleaned down as best as I can. So you can just see the last little bits of grime that were left on the lower part of the headstock here, and I've just used a bit of diesel to help break down the last bits and not damage the paintwork. Notice that I've still got the headstock return pipe plugged up, so none of this grime is going back into the oil tank. It's all staying within the headstock, and I'm doing my best to wipe it out with blue shop towel and then do a final lick around everywhere. And you notice under that back lever there was quite a lot of grime still lurking underneath the lever, but without removing that last lever I managed to get all of it out with the diesel. And it's safe to say the headstock's looking a lot better than it did when I opened up the lid for the first time around 2 years ago. So it's took a bit of time to get everything that I needed and get the job done, but we're making progress now. So with the headstock pretty much all cleaned out, I've moved on to removing the face cover of the quick change gearbox. And on my machine, you may have noticed in a previous video, there is a bit of a bash guard plate on the side of the quick change gearbox, and it was only until now that I've actually had a chance to remove this plate and see whether or not there was any damage to the original casting, and I'm pleased to say that there isn't. It looks like this has just been made as a bit of a backup safety protection for the casting of the machine. So not sure why they've gone about doing that plate, but I'm pleased that they have. Perhaps it was just a small job for an apprentice or something like that. As you can see, I had to remove the handles for the shift mechanism, not the central quick change shift, just the three selector handles, to allow the face of the gearbox to be removed. Also had to loosen off the switches there, just to give clearance to get the casting out without damaging the shafts. So you can see here there's some damage to a few of the teeth on 2 of the gears in this quick change gearbox, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the whole gearbox and disassemble it and replace the bearings and try and repair these gears or replace them if I can find a replacement, but that's unlikely. So with those damaged gears found inside the quick change gearbox, I'm definitely going to go ahead and remove the whole gearbox and replace the bearings while I'm on. So to remove these shafts, there's a little roll pin in the lead shaft, and there's also a shear pin in the thread cutting shaft at the top there. And the square drive shaft doesn't have anything retaining it, it's just locked in place with this end bearing block here. So I'm going to remove the thrust bearing from the thread cutting shaft from the lead screw, and then the whole lead screw can just slide out through the bearing block, and luckily I've just got enough clearance to slide underneath the shaper. That's another machine that I've got sitting in the workshop needing a bit of attention. But no doubt I'll need that machine for cutting some gears, so we might have a look at that in a future video sooner than later. So back over to the gearbox side here, just got a bit of wood here just to support the gearbox as I remove the last 2 bolts, just to act as a little bit of a lever, take the weight off when I'm taking the bolts out and help support it. So now moving on to lowering down the carriage from the saddle here, and the bolt heads that hold this in place were absolutely rammed full of crud, so got to use a pick to scrape them out before I could get the Allen key in. And then again, just got a couple of bits of wood underneath it just to help lower it down without dropping it. And you'll see in a second I had a little bit of a fight with the oil pickup line, but it's got enough flex on that I was able to get this removed without it being an issue. But when I go to reinstall it, I'll probably do it in the center of the machine where I've got a little bit more. So with that, I've now got all the gears and shafts from within the headstock all cleaned up and degreased. The parts washer has been real help doing this task, and it was well worth the buy. As you can see, all the gears have cleaned up really well, and I managed to salvage a gasket from this blanking plate here, so I can trace around it and cut out a fresh one. And I've also got the labyrinth seal cleaned up here, the braking shaft, and looking at this shaft here, this journal surface looks like it's got a little bit of damage to it, so I just need to figure out whereabouts that shaft has come from and what should be riding on that section there, whether it's a gear or a bearing, and we'll see whether we can maybe rectify some of the slight ridging that I can feel on that journal. So these are the little rollers that go inside each clutch pack, and as you can see, the outer barrel here rotates, and there is some very small needle roller bearings inside, and these are a little bit gritty, so I've just been pulling the shaft out slightly and getting in there with some clean WD-40, just purging it through and working the shaft round, just to try and work out any grime without having to fully disassemble these bearings, as I have already had a couple of the needles drop out, and it's not very fun trying to find them and put them back in place. So I'm trying to just clean these in situ. As you can see there, once the oil starts working in, the needles do actually start to roll nicely. Again, just purging that with WD, just to flush any grit or bits of grime through these rollers before I store them on the bench until I reassemble this clutch. So that's rolling nice and free now, with no binding, no catching anywhere. That's really nice. With all the parts of the first clutch basket now cleaned, I can begin the reassembly process, making sure to lube up everything as I go and make sure these rollers are nicely cleaned and lubed before they get assembled. The same with the adjustment rings, making sure they've got plenty oil in. I'm just using the same ISO 32 oil that will be going into the headstock when it goes back together. Once the last ring goes in place and the circlip's installed, you can see there's a little bit of slack within the clutch body, so you just take that slack up with the adjustment ring. So with the first clutch basket now torn down, I've been able to have a good look at this part, and looking closely, see if I can get the camera to focus, the clutch plates have actually worn some notches into the basket itself, so obviously that's not ideal, and I believe you could probably get away with filing those out, getting rid of the bumps and you may be able to use that. But I was lucky enough when I've been hunting for parts to come across some new old stock, and I'm pleased to say that the part we have here is a replacement drive clutch basket, still in its protective wax, so I'm really pleased with that. As you can see, this also comes with bearings pre-installed, so that's 2 bearings I didn't have to buy separately. Obviously I haven't peeled this wax off yet to inspect the part, but it should be a brand new item underneath this protective wax. So I'm really pleased to have this part, as I think they're getting harder and harder to find new old stock parts for these machines, and it's really going to make the difference having a replacement item rather than trying to repair this one. Now, if your basket's shattered or destroyed and this looks like it's in better condition, by all means drop me a message and I will be happy to sell this one on. But I don't fancy putting it back into my machine since I've managed to get this replacement part here. So with that, I can now move on to stripping down this second clutch pack and degreasing all the parts, cleaning all the moving mechanisms, cleaning all the adjustment rings, and just making sure that these clutch packs are nice and clean and ready to be reassembled, as we're getting close to being able to start the reassembly of the headstock. So with that, I've now got the forwards and reverse clutch packs both stripped down, degreased and reassembled with fresh oil, ready for when they are reassembled. And I've got the replacement new old stock part for the forward side clutch basket, and I'm just having a look at the reverse side basket here. As you can see, there is some very slight wear marks on the basket, but they are nowhere near as substantial as the forwards basket has had. So with this part obviously having the bearings still inside it, I'm going to be replacing these bearings where the new old stock part has the bearings pre-installed. So I'm going to make up a drive bush to push this bearing out, and while I'm on, I've also got these other gears from within the headstock. There is another needle roller bearing here and a couple of different bushes. So as you can see here, I've got a bearing racing seal driver kit, which comes with a selection of sizes that are going to work for one of them is going to work for pushing those bearings out. And then I've been hunting around on eBay and managed to get myself some let's just got myself a box of bar ends, some offcuts here from an aircraft manufacturing factory for a bloke who's got a few CNC machines basically. He's been selling these bar end offcuts and I bought a box for 80 quid. I thought they're going to come in very handy for different odd jobs in the workshop, and sure enough there's a couple of offcuts in that box that are going to work just right for making up the different size drivers that I need for removing and reinstalling the bushes and bearings for these gears. So I'm just going to make up the couple extra drivers that I need and make them to suit this large handle here, and then I can just use the press to drive everything out nice and steadily. It's going to be the best way to do it. So with these little drivers now turned up to suit each different size bushing and bearing, I'm ready to start the disassembly process of these gears, and then I can be prepared for starting the reassembly and installing all the new bearings and bushers before we start assembling the headstock. So with these drivers now made up, and I'm pretty much at the point where I'm ready to remove all the bearings and the bushers from these gears. I need to do a little bit of work to my press and get that prepared so I know I'm going to be pressing square and have a nice selection of tooling to use. So I'm going to end this video here, guys, and I'm sorry to drag this out a little bit longer than I would have liked to, but as you can see, I'm right in the thick of it and I want to get everything right before this machine goes back together. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to tune in to the next episode.